Awesome. So I'm glad you guys found it this morning. It's so funny. I was even talking to Rick 'cause we were scrambling around getting here because I was like, okay, Roy and Derek are coming and got to get there. And we have one kid at home just helping us do some stuff, getting ready for a big party tonight. So anyway, I'm glad you guys made it. I guess I don't know where to start. Why don't you guys start by introducing yourself? Because Roy, I think you and I have been talking a little bit for a while, talking about the book. I think we talked, was a couple months ago?
Yeah, some time ago.
Yeah, I've just been on LinkedIn. Anyway, I'd love to hear, introduce yourself. Go back as far or as short as you want to go.
I'm Roy Christensen. I'm the author of the glossary of common industry and project terminology. This is Derek Rosner. He's the editor of the book, the glossary. It's a labor of love that I've worked on for actually 6 years. But I started my career as a welder. I enjoyed doing that work, but I thought I might get some education at SAIT, so I took the Welding Engineering Technology program.
Okay.
And after that, I worked in quality control, inspection. I did some pipeline work, facility work, fab shop work. And in the late 90s, I went to work downtown for engineering procurement companies for major projects. And that's when I really found that I enjoyed writing. And I started writing for projects, writing instructions. It started out slow. I didn't do very much in the first number of years. But in the last number of years, I've done a lot of writing. And then I started, I'd move from project to project, company to company, write some instructions, improve some documentation they have. And I found it kind of frustrating that every time I moved, I'd start over again. So I thought it would be valuable if I could produce some project instructions, work instructions, and also a glossary that I could bring to the market, and I wouldn't have to redo it every time. I could write it once and then bring it to the market and offer it to projects. So I found over the years that communication has always been a major challenge for projects. Everyone assumes that there's an understanding of what's said, but that's not always the case. And with major projects, there's major bucks, and schedule is always a concern. When you lose days or you lose dollars, you cannot get them back. So it's really important to have clear communication right from the start, especially with major projects that they take 1, 2, or many more years. There's people coming and going. They mob and demob, staff up, staff down through different phases of the project. Many people come and go. So I thought a glossary is something that would bring a lot of value to the industry.
No, I'm sure. It's so funny because I do work on so many different areas of pipeline, but my experience is pretty limited to pipeline, and I use a lot of language and words. I don't want to call them vernacular. I guess that's what they are, but terminology that's specific to pipeline, and it's wild to me. It seems so commonsensical to me, but a lot of people don't understand it. And even when I went to some of the engineering shops, they didn't have some of the same language I did. So I am looking forward to seeing this out in the market because it's pretty fresh, right? It just got published just now, didn't it?
Yes, just before Christmas it
Okay.
was released. And it takes about 6 weeks to get uploaded and prepared. It's going to be available worldwide in about 44,000 libraries, retailers, and online sellers.
Oh, amazing.
Including Amazon and Indigo. I don't know why, but it's only available on Amazon as a paperback and on Indigo as an ebook.
Okay.
But it's available in various currencies around the world.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I'm writing a paper right now, so maybe I'll use it for one of my references. So Derek, how did you get involved?
Well, Roy and I, we met back in 2014.
Even earlier, 2012 maybe.
2012. Yeah, we worked on we didn't work directly together, but we worked on the Curl Oil Sands project.
Okay, right on.
Yeah, so I was on that project for about 7 years, and that's how Roy and I met. He was doing some writing, and he would share some of his writing with me. And being a technical editor, I would take an interest in anything that he would write, especially outside of the project. And I would comment, and I would encourage Roy to continue because this is really going the extra mile, right? We all come into the office, we do our work, we go home, but Roy would do more. He would take that knowledge and try to capture it, and to try to share it. Right. One of the big things that Roy's doing with this book is he's trying to capture knowledge transfer. So when I was a younger professional, I saw this all the time. We would joke with my other younger colleagues. We'd say, "Look at that dinosaur," right? Meaning, here's an older man or an older professional who is a harbinger of all this knowledge. Right? And I think we would see these people retire, right? And we would always ask ourselves, well, what knowledge are we losing from this resource retiring, right? And one of the main thrusts of Roy's work is to try to capture that knowledge transfer, try to retain that knowledge as these experienced and expert professionals retire. How do we retain that knowledge, right? And this book right here underpins sort of the main thrust of the knowledge transfer project, which is something that Roy started 6 or 7 years ago.
2018.
2018?
So what was the impetus behind, like, when did you decide to actually make it into a book? Because you'd probably been working on some form of this probably for 25, 30 years without realizing it.
No, not really. I had prepared several instructions for project success, and one of them was a glossary. It started with about 200 or 300 words that are problematic for every project. And it just kept going. It's something I enjoyed doing. Derek's an awesome editor. We work well together. And we just kept adding material. That was 2018, 2019. Then the pandemic happened. We just kept going. And actually, for some period of time, I tried to stop writing and prepare a complete finished work that could be brought to the market in some fashion. And that took a lot of effort because there's just more and more material to add. But we finally did create a finished work. I've kept saving material, so I've got enough for a second edition if I decide when and where I'm going to do that. But there's just so much information that's unclear, and so many things that you take for granted that that everyone else will know because it's common knowledge. But you go to a new industry. For example, in oil sands projects, there's water treatment facilities. Water treatment manufacturers don't do oil sands work. So they don't have the same language, the same terminology. And everyone assumes, it's an oil sands project, everyone knows what we mean. But the oil sands fabricator is in Ontario, and they do water treatment work. They don't know oil sands. So if there's any ambiguity in the procurement documents, in the communications, in the agreements, even verbal agreements, it's going to cause problems.
No, for sure. I think even with a lot of contracts, a lot of the change management and even adversarial issues I've found in my own projects, they do come from, when it's not 100% black and white. So a lot of these contracts do leave a little bit of vagueness intentionally, so you can field fit some of these decisions. But when you're talking about these things, like, there can't be any ambiguity. There has to be an understanding.
I found that on some projects the mentality is, if we don't have anything right, if we need to, we'll do it in the change order. So they're planning to do change orders. So if they don't get it in the first change order, then they'll do it in the second change order. Well, why not do it right the first time? Why not be clear and say, this is what we want, double check, make sure that's what you need, issue the procurement documents, get the schedule, get the equipment fabricated, get it inspected, get it shipped to site, then construction can do their thing. But whenever there's ambiguity, there's just so many opportunities for problems to arise.
But I've heard that from the owner side and the engineering side, it's just to kind of sort it out in the field, just to get it out. And what happens is, again, this is my own experience, but what happens if we get to the field and when you get the first change order involved, even though if it's aligned, we all agree to it all makes sense, it does create an opportunity for a little bit of an adversarial relationship to develop at times with the people in the field, and it'd be nice if we could avoid those if at all possible.
And it's only going to add cost escalation.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to say, well, this change order is a negative number. We're going to give you money back. So if there's work required, and even if it's on paper, someone's already done work, they've done engineering, they've done CAD drawings, that's not free.
Yeah.
And, maybe they haven't done that much, but they're not going to give that money back. Maybe you say, oh, we don't need this now. Okay, whatever. You still pay for it. So clear communications for project management, for procurement documents, project meetings. It's critical to success.
The first time I ever understood there was a difference in terminology and language was I grew up on the contractor side, so I spent a couple of years working at one of the big operators in town, TransCanada. And they started talking about direct and indirect resources. Well, I know what that means. For me, it's, direct resources are usually the crafts or the hands, basically people that touch the pipe or on the right of way, or basically you can measure their progress in general with some sort of like per meter, what they do each day. And indirects is any of the support staff, engineering, project management, safety, environment, trucking. This is so ingrained in my head. So they're not measured per meter. They're support staff. They're more duration based. And so I took this for granted, and I got back to TransCanada. That's the first time I'd ever heard they don't see it that way. For them, direct is anything to do with the contractor building a pipeline, and indirects was basically their side and their subcontracts. And it was really, that's the first time my eyes ever got open. It's like, oh, okay, maybe we're speaking different languages.
That's a really good example.
Yeah.
Yeah. I spent some time with TransCanada myself. So.
Yeah, but again, until you had that experience, you don't realize it. And then it got me thinking, and like, you guys would know better than I would. Each operator, each producer, they would have their own kind of terminology. They have the broad general would be the same, but it'd be interesting to know they do have their little nuances and jargon and vernacular that are different from company to company. It'd be good to consolidate this, which is, I assume, which is the impetus behind this.
And they'll often use the same terminology to mean different things.
Oh, yes.
Like for example, in technical editing, there's a rule that says call the same thing by the same name. Doing otherwise invites ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
Calling different things by the same name does the same thing, right? So directs. Are you talking about TransCanada? Are you talking about this other company? Are you talking about this other company? Because the meaning depends on that context, right? And that's chronic. Right?
Oh, for throughout the industry, not just our industry, I'd say most industries.
And not just the industry, but across countries, across, disciplines, right? And it's a chronic issue. It's pathological, and this is an attempt, I think, to address that. Right?
Oh my! Well, I'm excited about this, but there's a funny little thing that's evolving in society, and it's evolving language. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how does that factor into this? Because I know this is primarily a technical, probably glossary more than anything, but there is a nuance that is changed from industry to industry, culture to culture, and stuff like that.
So what we didn't do was, for example, go to the AMP, or formerly the NACE glossary, and copy all their definitions to create a new glossary with a new name. So the intent with this was, industry and project terminology. So it's not really focused so much on the technical side, the technical details of work. It's more of the communication, career development, project management, project communication, especially with procurement, less so with engineering terminology. This glossary has several appendices, and one of them is how to create your own glossary. So although I've written this glossary and defined so many terms, that doesn't mean it's the only way to define something. And if a company needs or uses terminology differently, all they need to do is identify that and make sure everyone understands it. Everyone communicating in the company can use the terminology, and when they go outside and communicate with others, they can confirm understanding and have clear communication. So it's not that I've defined definitively what everything means, but it's a starting point. The material, could be copied, or it can be massaged and changed to suit whatever industry or project needs may arise.
To suit TransCanada's definition of directs, for example. Right? And that's one of the services he offers. You can have this book. This is a good starting spot. But we want to add our own terminology. Maybe we want to revise some of the definitions in here. And that's one of the services Roy offers.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, it'd be good to get in touch with different
So it did
operators.
start as a smaller, obviously, publication, a few hundred pages. But with 630 pages, it's a lot for a company to go through and revise it all. But again, there's an appendix there that describes how to develop a glossary. Many companies actually do have them, but the thing is they don't use them, or they don't update them. So they may have 20 pages that were developed 10 years ago or by somebody who thought it was a good idea, which it is. But they need to take that to the next level, have somebody assigned to be responsible for editing and updating the glossary and incorporating their terminology so that it works for everyone.
What would encourage you to come out with another volume? And
Just time.
yeah.
You know, I was surprised. The writing was the fun part. It took 4 years. It was part-time. I was writing other instructions simultaneously with Derek doing the editing, of course. So the last year I was trying to tighten it up and have a completed project or a completed work. That was a bit of a challenge. Then there was a year of trying to figure out how to bring it to market, what to do. And I knew a couple of guys who had self-published books. So I talked to them and they said, it's a good idea, you can do that. So that self-publishing, it took over a year. I was surprised how long it took. You can't just flip an MS Word document into a format to be published. Like, it has to be formatted differently, and it has to be massaged, and they have to do things with it. And then there's the cover art, etc. I started working with one service provider, and after a couple months I said, you know what, this is not working. Like, I just don't know where this is going. I don't know. There were some challenges with them, and so it was a money back guarantee, so I said, give my money back. So I went to another one that was also a referral from someone that had worked with them, and I thought, you know, how long can this take? A couple months, I'll have it out, it'll be published, you know, I'll have a party in June. and it just went on, and when they converted the files, it just changed the bullet structures, it changed some of the formatting, and surprisingly,
super traumatic experience.
it changed some of the. It incorporated spelling mistakes.
Oh my God.
So
Obvious things. I reviewed the proof and I was like, this bullet is bigger than that bullet, and you can see it from like 3 feet away. I don't understand how anyone could miss that. That's a pretty obvious thing. I mean, I open the book and I see it.
How important is it as a technical writer that you know the industry and know the framework? Or could anyone do what you do, even if you didn't understand the context in the industry?
You know, the really good thing about technical editing is that it's not really, it's not subject specific, right? Like,
Yeah.
the approach to technical editing is always the same, right? It's topic agnostic, right? So I could write for oil and gas. I could write for a plastic surgeon, which I've done. I could write for an operations manual for a chimpanzee sanctuary, which is what I've done that, or telecommunications for for a Taiwanese networking company, or a UK nuclear power plant, oil refinery in Kuwait. You can work for the U.S. Army, right? The approach is always the same, right? It's good to know about the topic. It's better if you know about it, especially if you're an expert about it, but typically technical editors are not. We just take this content and we treat it the same way, right? Regardless of what the content is. So it's one of the great things about my job is that I can work for a doctor, I can work for a geophysicist, I can work for a politician, I can work for oil and gas, right? It's wonderful to have that diversity of experience.
How did you get into it?
So I'm a native Calgarian. I was born and raised in Calgary, and I decided I wanted to get a degree in something when I was in my 20s. I wanted to show something from my 20s. So I decided I was going to get a degree. So this is back when Mount Royal University was a college. So I took a couple of years there, and I took every single course that I could think of, from French to political science to philosophy. I was just trying to figure out what it is that I liked and what I was good at, and it turns out I'm pretty average at just about everything, except for English. I was able to knock out A's in my English classes without much effort, and I thought, well, you got to stick with what you know. And so it took a really long time for me to get my degree. It took me about 6 years because I kept taking semesters off to go work in Vancouver in construction. But
Interesting.
after about 6 years, I finally graduated and got my degree, and then I thought, well, I need to do something with this because I know people who've got English degrees and they work at Amazon throwing boxes around. So I thought, you spend a lot of money, you spend a lot of time on this, you need to use this. So I sold everything that I owned and I moved to Taiwan, and I lived there for 2.5 years.
Oh, cool.
And I cut my teeth in technical editing that way by writing for the 30th largest corporation in the nation, user guides, manuals, and my work was translated into I think 40 or 50 languages. And the work, it's not particularly exciting work, but good distribution. my manuals reached about 100 countries.
And exciting for a younger person.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's kind of how I got into it. And when I got back to Calgary, I immersed myself in oil and gas. And with the skills that I accumulated in Taiwan and telecommunications, I just transferred those over to oil and gas. And that's when I realized, you can do this for any industry. Right? It'd be better if you knew the industry, but it's not a prerequisite, right? Because if I can't understand it, I can't edit it, right? So the approach is always the same, which is wonderful.
The first time I ever been exposed to technical writing, I worked at Worley Parsons for a few years on a pipeline job.
So did I.
Yeah, after
What pipeline job?
NGP, Northern Gateway Pipeline. So I worked there, and I worked with a girl named Heather Tobe, was our technical writer. And I'd never been exposed to this before, so we'd write our reports and plans, like normal stuff. Your execution plans, your base of estimates, your environmental plans, your quality. So the stuff we normally do all the time.
Yeah.
And then we gave it to Heather, and there was another guy, I can't remember his name, and he would read it, and then he would ask questions. Well, what does that mean? So I've never had anyone ask that. Well, we know what it means. We wrote it down.
Yeah.
But she's like, well, I don't know. She goes, I'm a technical writer. I'm not a pipeliner.
Yeah.
So I don't understand what that means. So clearly, it's either ambiguous or it's not clear, or they're using funny terminology or whatever. And that's the first time I'd ever met. So I'm still in touch with Heather even now. Talk to her on LinkedIn every now and again.
That's a great point. The first job I got after I got back from Asia was with the Mackenzie Gas Project, Colt Engineering.
Oh, you must know Mike Wagner and Dave Hermanson, Pete Weeb, Jim Dixon, Davey Anderson,
Man,
Jim Kilgore.
This is the very beginning of my career. Right?
Okay.
So this is like, we're talking 20 years ago, maybe more.
Maybe more. It'd be more.
So some of those names are ringing bells. But when I interviewed for that job, Sylvia asked me. She said, "How many years' experience do you have in energy?" And I said to her, "I don't have a single hour of experience in energy." And you know what she said to me? She said, "That's
Perfect. Yeah.
And I said, "Could you explain to me how my ignorance of the industry brings value to this position?" And she says, "Well, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building this Mackenzie gas pipeline. This Mackenzie gas, and it's going to cross Crown lands, private lands, indigenous lands, and we need permits for every single one of these. And there's going to be over 2,000 permits, right? And because you're ignorant, okay, you're going to read these permits, which are written by experts, soil experts, PhD level people, master's degree level people, but our audience are largely communities, small communities, whose reading level's around a grade 4. So while the experts are writing this stuff and they understand it, and maybe even you understand it, the readership is not going to understand it. And because you have no idea of what we're talking about, because you have no experience, you'll read it and you'll say, "Hey, I don't understand that." Right?
Interesting.
If you don't understand it, the community won't understand it.
Was it Worley or Colt when you were working on that job?
It was Colt, and then it became Worley, and then it became Worley Parsons, and then it became AMEC, I think, and then it became AMEC Foster Wheeler, and I was with that company that whole time. So for about 8 years, I became the technical editing lead, and I had a team of.
Was Art Harms around back then?
Art Harms, I know.
Or
Art
Jim
Harms.
Steves or any of those
Jim
guys?
Steves, I know. I work with Jim Steves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see him sometimes on Facebook.
Yeah,
we're
no,
not in
likewise,
touch.
yeah.
We're not in touch, but I see his travels on Facebook and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know.
No, I'm
those
still
people.
in touch with all these guys for sure.
Ian Ballman,
Ian Baum, I know the name. Yeah.
BAHLMAN.
Yeah. So I wrote it. There's an old boy named Mike Wagner,
That sounds really familiar.
and he was back in those days or whatever. He worked on MGP and all these other projects. And I was trying to write a paper for ASME after my experience on Northern Gateway. Again, just a kid. I call myself a kid. I would have been like 30 or something like that.
I was on Northern Gateway.
And I wrote this, and I could get it to a good point with, and I mean, it went through a couple of cycles, and then they kicked it out, said it's not technical enough. So I got with Mike Wagner at the time, said, "Mike, can you help me make this better?" Because he was really strong writer. And he helped me do it, and the Asthma wouldn't publish it. He goes, well, my buddy's Ollie Klinger down in Texas. He has a journal called the Pipeline and Gas Journal. He'll publish it for us. Sure as shit, he sent it down to Ollie, and Ollie published it for us. It's good to know people. You know.
For sure.
Yeah.
So my career obviously took a different path than Derek's. I couldn't wait to get out of high school. I did get my English 30, but I couldn't wait to start working as a welder and becoming a welder, a B welder. I worked on a rig, doing some rig welding, but it was in the towers downtown, some of the construction work there.
Interesting. Sorry, are you from Calgary?
Yes, I'm
Oh,
from
cool.
Calgary.
Okay.
Well, I was born on a farm east of born and raised at a farm east of the city.
Okay.
It's Standard, and most of my working life has been in Calgary. So I've always enjoyed writing, but I'm not educated as an English technical editor, obviously. So a funny story, I had a friend that I played chess with, and I could never beat him. Never once did I ever beat him. Once I stayed up all night. We played I don't know how many games. I could not beat him. And I felt the same way sending my work to Derek. No matter how good I think it is, he sends it back with markups, comments, what's this, what's that? And I go, I got to do it again. But he always makes the work better. He always asks the right questions. What does this mean? Why do you say this? What about this? What about that? And in the glossary, something that brought a lot of value was he'd say, well, why don't you give an example? So I go, okay, I'd go and Google and search for some kind of example of something. One of the examples that I used was the Gimli glider. The aircraft that was flying from Ottawa, Toronto area up to Edmonton, and they thought they filled it with liters of fuel, or gallons. They filled it with liters. And so they got to Winnipeg and they ran out of fuel. And they were able to land at an old airport in Gimli. So it was an example of miscommunication, misunderstanding, where obviously they thought they had put enough fuel in. They didn't need to fill the tank because it wasn't going around the world, just going to Edmonton. But even still, when it was just at the time when the industry had switched from gallons to liters, and there was a miscommunication, and everyone thought everyone else knew what they were doing, and everyone thought everything was okay, but they got into the sky, and that wasn't the case.
God, it's scary. Even like I feel last week or so, there's been a couple air crashes, and it's hard to believe this stuff still happens in today's day and age with communication, and I don't know what it is.
Well, there's thousands of flights every day, but I get onto a flight, and it's like, I hope everything's okay.
Yeah.
And when you land, it's like,
Yeah.
awesome, we're here.
So what prompted you to seek out a technical editor? I say that because when I wrote something which I was really proud of, it was based on my personal experience, not just on one project, but up to my career to that point, and I was really confident. I knew it well, but I knew it could be better, and that's why I reached out to Mike to make it better.
So the very first experience I had doing some technical writing for major projects was an engineering instruction for manufacturing record books, which are also referred to as turnover packages. So I was working on the project, and I would see these turnover packages coming for equipment, materials, and they were poorly prepared. And at that time, the switch was just being made to engineering document management systems. The previous project I had worked on was all paper-based. So once it went digital, I could pull up some statistics. I could count the number of MRBs, the revisions, how many were revised, meaning how many were reworked. And I found that only about 17% were acceptable on first submittal.
That's it.
All the rest had to go back for rework to get more data included, sometimes data removed, because they didn't follow the requirements of the supplier document and data requirements in the purchase order. So I proposed to the quality manager, we need to do something. He said, well, write a report. So I wrote a report, and I'm not a technical writer. I'd never done that before. I'm a welder and an inspector, inspection coordinator. So I started writing, and I got some help from others, which is very useful. Wrote the report, and then the company said, okay, well, now we need an engineering instruction. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a technical writer. But I wrote an engineering instruction based on a template they had and got some input from others. And I saw the value they bring. They ask those questions, they improve the English and make sure the grammar is correct, and the use of basic English, plain English, so that it's easily digestible, easily be understood. And after that, I started doing more technical writing for projects. It was never in my job description until maybe in the last 5 years. I was starting getting recruited to do technical writing. Until that time, I was hired as an inspection coordinator, SQS coordinator. But anytime they needed some resources, or I'd go and they'd say, you have to do this, and I'd say, well, there's no instruction, there's no information. I know what to do. I don't need the instruction, but the project needs it. The suppliers need it. Everyone needs to know what's going to happen. So I started writing the technical documents. It could be, a plan, it could be a procedure, it could be an instruction. There's forms also. But major projects would always have technical writers assigned for the purposes you described. And I would just go to them and say, hey, can you edit this and help me produce a finished work? And I always found they added value.
Agreed.
And maybe they would ask a question, they'd say, well, that's irrelevant. Okay, I'm the subject matter expert. I know what's relevant and what's not. But whenever they don't understand what I'm trying to say, I'd say, well, I understand it. I know what I mean. I wrote it. But if the reader doesn't understand it, there's a lack of communication.
Yeah, no, I remember when Heather asked me the first time, what does this mean? After getting over being offended for about 2 seconds, then I'd be like, oh, okay, well, if you don't understand it, great. Then let's reword it. Let's change it. Let's give an example.
So the purpose of writing is to communicate.
Yeah.
And to communicate to anyone who picks up the document or opens it online. And if they don't understand it or they can't use the information, you've failed. So I've really enjoyed doing that. When you work as a welder, you don't want anyone to ask, where's your grinding ticket? And you want to do good work. When you're an inspector, you almost look for perfection. You can't find it. It's work. It's got a degree of acceptability. Usually, if it's acceptable, it's okay. But whenever there's excellent work, it looks good. Whether it's a coating, whether it's a weld bead. And same with writing. You want to. It's really difficult to get a perfect piece of work, especially when it's quite long and it discusses various topics. But you can have it clear and concise, and you can communicate the message you want to communicate. Maybe someone else would say it differently. Maybe someone else will add or subtract material. But if you've got a clear message that the other party can read and understand and take action on, you've fulfilled your mission, and the project will be successful.
And by collaborating, we improve, right? One of the analogies I use, I work with a lot of engineers.
I'm sorry that happened to you. Just kidding.
Thank you. These experiences can be, they're actually very similar to engineer, not very, I sort of lost my train of thought here.
But I'll jump in then.
Sure.
Will you find it?
Sure.
Like, so even getting back to when I was working with these technical writers the first time,
Right.
again, I very quickly realized how much value they add. So now I've talked about them all the time to other people when we have to write a report of any significant length. So when they're a bit smaller, I think all of us, we're all comfortable up to a certain point.
More manageable,
But, yeah, but once it gets to a certain size of a report, again, I swear by them, and I wouldn't imagine not using a technical writer to, at the very least, spend some time on it and cast their eyes over it. Because I've seen the quality and the improvement by them doing that discipline.
I've got it. It's come back to me. This happens more and more as I get older. So I will, if I'm working with a new engineer, I will say to them, listen, you've designed the building, okay? And the building is good design because you designed it. You're the engineer, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in after this building is built with my drywall cart. I'm going to pick up the drywall, I'm going to paint the walls, and occasionally I might even say to you, the penthouse, I would move the kitchen to where the bathroom is, and the bathroom to where the kitchen is, and I give them reasons, right? It may not make sense to the engineer, and maybe the engineer will shoot that idea down, but I'll make those suggestions only occasionally because I'm not the designer, right? I'll clean out all the drywall, paint all the walls, and I'll come downstairs and we'll pave the parking lot. We'll put in those nice, clean, painted lines so it looks all nice, and we're going to stand side by side, and we're going to look up at this building. And we're going to realize that, what we built here, is better than anything that either one of us could have individually built. I can't build it. I'm not an engineer. Right? I can't go to the quarry and mine the stone. That's your job, right? You bring the stone, which is the building, and I bring up my chisel and I start carving. And I try to sculpt this thing to be something that's more, something that is clear, concise, complete, consistent, compliant, correct, and if at all possible, compelling, which is hard to do with technical documents. But those 7 C's, that's basically my job, right? And that's what I've been doing for about 25 years now. So, in a nutshell, I'm support, right? Without the engineer, without Roy, I have no stone, right? Which means I have to quarry my own stone, but I don't have the knowledge that Roy has. I don't have the knowledge that the engineer has. I don't have the knowledge that you have, right? So I need the stone from someone.
But you're describing how I describe pipeline. People always ask, why do I love pipeline industry so much in construction? I'm like, because it's like the definition of, group work and being a part of a team and being part of special and building something. Nobody does it alone. And I like working in a group, working on a team, and for sure, I've described it the exact same way.
And completing a job, putting it into operation.
Oh, it's very satisfying.
So when Derek edits my work, very often it goes back and forth 4 to 6 times. So it's not something that he just edits and sends back to me, and then I accept the markups or delete the comments. And
Sometimes we argue.
What's that?
Sometimes we argue.
Well, sometimes it goes back more than once. The same subject matter, the same question, just fleshing out, what the concept is, what it needs to say, how it needs to be presented, who the audience is. I'd like to finish that story about the MRB as I started.
Yeah.
So that first instruction, the rate of rework, the rate of acceptability was 17%. So I made some suggestions as to how this could be improved. And one of the main ones was to use an index and to get that index reviewed by the project at the beginning, months before the MRB comes in. When the MRB comes in with the welding procedures and all the other documents that are in it, the data reports, X-ray reports, it's 200 pages, 300 pages, 600 pages, maybe more. It's really difficult to go through it and mark it up and send it back and get the rework. An index is like 2 pages, and it lists all the contents. And you can go through them and say, no, we don't want the calculations. Project's already reviewed them. They're already on file. We don't need them again in the data book. Same with the welding procedures. They're reviewed up front. They're on file. We don't need them again in the data book. We want the data report, X-ray reports, MTRs, et cetera, et cetera. So when that index is reviewed, it's returned, and it can be reworked. It can go back and forth a couple of times. And then when the MRB is prepared, and often it's not people who are not doing the work. It's administrative staff in the office that put together the QC file and submit it. So when it comes in, go through the index. Yeah, everything's there as required. It's complete. It's correct. It's okay. You know what the return rate was for acceptability after that? I checked on a subsequent project, 81%.
Awesome.
You know what a percentage of improvement that is?
I don't know, 500%.
475.
Wow.
475% improved. And many projects use this concept now. Getting the index up front, ensuring that it's going to have the content that's needed. Then at the end of the project, whoever compiles it, all they do is go through and go, this is the job, this is the data, here it is.
I like what we've been doing. The last few jobs I've worked on, we had to do like a progressive turnover on our turnover packages. So we're basically doing it as the job is going on, and I think it's a great way to do it as well.
Yeah. For a construction project, it's very different than fabrication in a facility. You're building a pressure vessel or a package, some piping. You get it all built, put the package together. It's a few hundred pages. But a construction project,
Well, there's thousands.
So if there's, and again, if you use the index or a system where you can identify what data is being turned over when, so if you need it, you can access it easily, no problem.
I always like telling people about these turnover packages. Like, well, how long do you need them for? I'm like, I don't know, the life of the pipeline. That's how long we need them.
And if you don't get some of the data, once the contractor's gone,
it's tough.
It's gone forever. And it doesn't mean that there aren't alternatives. You can use positive material identification to check the material or investigate the status of the material, the makeup of the material. But if the project wants the MTRs, get them up front, make sure they're in there. If they're not needed, identify they're not needed. And then you don't have to bother yourself with more data that's serving no purpose.
So what would you be doing if you weren't doing what you're doing now, Roy?
I don't know. It's hard to think.
What about you, Derek?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. You know, I've been doing what I've been doing for a really long time now, 25 years. I would probably try something else. Now, I'm not sure what that would be. But, you know, with that said, I think that it would be difficult to do that because I really love what I do. I don't love it so much that I would do it for free, right? But it's afforded me a really good lifestyle and really good income, and I really like it. And there's a few other things that I like I like coding, and I like riding e-bikes. I've got an AI drone that follows me around on my e-bike, which is kind of cool. But to answer your question, I don't know.
Well, you can do what you're doing anywhere in the world. What keeps you in Calgary?
Well, Calgary's my home.
Okay.
And that's another good question. I've always thought about maybe moving to Portugal, and because the taxes are favorable over there, and they're really accommodating to expats who, from a tax perspective. But I don't know. There's something about Calgary. It's probably because it's home. It keeps me here. There's no reason why I couldn't be working in Mexico right now, right, full time, and just enjoying the beach every night. But I don't. And I just, I don't know.
It's home.
It's home. You know, I've done a lot of traveling in my life. Like, I've probably visited 30 or 35 countries. I've lived in a few countries, you know. And it takes some effort to do that. And maybe it's just an age thing. Maybe I'm just getting mellower. And, you know, I've done a lot of the exciting traveling, right?
You could be pretty mellow at minus 30.
You could be pretty mellow, yeah. Your perspective changes, right? When I was a young man, I was bartending my way through university, and I would just gravitate toward social groups. I'd stay up all night, and you know, the louder the better. And now I'm the opposite. I tend to avoid people, and I like quiet places. And I like to do mellow things. I don't like.
You like to do technical editing, which is awesome.
I like technical editing, which many people just can't stand, which is wonderful for me, right? Because
You made a career out of it, actually. Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds awful, actually, but...
Most people I talk to, I talk about what I do for technical editing. You can see their eyes roll into the back of their heads within the first 15 seconds. And
how do I get out of this conversation?
Like, how can I change the topic, right? And I whenever I see that, I think, good, right? Because if everyone enjoyed doing that, then I'd have all this competition, right? And no one wants competition.
One thing I talk about to Marie, like even I think it was yesterday, so we went for dinner up in the University District, and we're looking at the Children's Hospital there, and I said, well, like, I'm not from here. I moved here, but Marie grew up here. And I said, babe, like, I can't imagine how the city's changed since you were a kid. She, from late 70s or whatever. And she goes, yeah, you know, my parents built that house in Edgemont in 1984, and that was basically the edge of town in the Northwest.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I can't believe it. She goes, I drive around sometimes, and I can't believe it either. And now the way our community is down in Bowness, it's like having, I don't know if you want to call it gentrification or whatever, but all these new houses and businesses, like, it's pretty exciting to see Calgary.
When I was a boy, Calgary had 400,000 people. And I remember playing in the fields of what is now Sunridge Mall. Like,
Wow!
It was just flat. It was just
Farms. It was farms.
It was dug up a little bit, but you know, I can't believe that I was allowed.
Because Sunridge Mall, Calgary South's gone, what, another 10 or 20 kilometers south of that now.
Yeah. And this is at a time when there was only a C train downtown. There was nowhere else. And if you wanted to drive from the northeast Calgary to Chinook, you did it on gravel roads. Right? This is how underdeveloped it was.
No way.
And they say that Calgary's boundaries expand in every direction, every year, by 1 mile.
Every year, eh?
Right? And Calgary's a big city, so you think about that every year, right? right? It's just like Los Angeles, right? We've got, except to the west, we pretty much have land northeast, northeast, south, and to a certain extent west, right? It's not like we're landlocked like Vancouver, hemmed in by the mountains and the oceans. Like, we have land, lots of it, and we're just
Like
we're here.
we live in Bonas, just right across from the COP, Pascapoo, and
nice
we
place.
still love it because we can escape the city at a moment's notice. So we're still 25 minutes from the golf course. What's it called? I'll think of the name. And 45 minutes from Canmore.
Oh, yeah.
We're driving fast, but again, we love it. And we've talked to our other friends who live down in Mahogany and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, like I thought that takes me 45 minutes to get there from
Well, it's
Calgary.
Sylvan Road now.
But you're
Yeah.
you're cycling distance to forests and mountain ranges. I mean, how wonderful is that? And
Oh, it's
you're-
amazing.
And you're living in a beautiful neighborhood.
Oh yeah, I love
West
it.
of the city, right?
It still feels
On
so.
the river.
So Calgary, I don't know how big Calgary is. Let's just say there's 1.5 million people in Calgary Metro. So when we look out our backyard, I'm telling you, you cannot feel it. All you see is an undeveloped quarry. I don't know what it used to be called, by where they call it Beaumont Park now, but it used to be a quarry over there, and we just see the river. I'm like, you wouldn't believe there's 1.5 million people here.
I think it's 1.4 million.
Is it?
Yeah. Which is 1 million more than when I was a boy,
Yeah.
which is incredible.
I don't know what everyone's doing.
I should have bought more real estate when I was a boy.
Really.
We all should have. We all should have, Derek.
I had some time to think now about what the future holds.
I would like
But
to know.
one of the things that everyone has been challenged with is the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Since 2014, there's been a downturn. Really has not been such a recovery.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a dearth of major projects. Any major projects were completed,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing new has started, really, with very few exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a real challenge for the industry because there's talk of new projects. Where are the people going to come from? Many people my age and older have gone. They've retired. They're not coming back. They've moved away because of lack of work. People who have been in the industry have had 10 years with a lack of career advancement. They haven't been able to progress with, whatever they wanted to do, whether it's project engineering, project management, discipline engineering, supply chain management. They just haven't had the experience of large projects. We've constantly had an influx of immigrants. It began in the late 90s, but I remember working on projects and thinking it's the United Nations. There's just people from everywhere here. Some people, obviously English is their second language, and they struggle. But in the end, after time, they do well. Others are educated in English. They get a master's degree in the US or Canada. Their English is excellent. But again, communication is always apt to cause problems. So I've seen, projects struggle to succeed in the good times when they could just hire anyone. They're experienced, they know what to do, they know how to do it. They don't need instructions, they don't need guidelines. They know why, they know how, they can get it done. Those kind of people are very far and few behind, few between now, and there's not going to be any more of them. So when projects hire, they're going to have to rely more on knowledge transfer, more on written documentation for project success. They can't just say, well, we'll figure it out. When you're issuing purchase orders for hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, you want it to be completed correct. You don't want to figure it out. You won't want to have change orders. If you're sending something to a supplier and there's an opportunity for them to exploit more money out of it, they will do it. If you've got a good working relationship with them, not so much of a challenge, but you can't buy all the equipment in Alberta. Some of it comes from other places in Canada,
For sure.
US, offshore, some from major corporations, some from mom and pop shops. But if your project is going to struggle, when you lose dollars and days, you just can never get them back. So,
But there's that portion of knowledge transfer that's not written down, and it's tough to quantify, but spending time around those older, more senior, experienced people, the people who have been through the good times, the bad times, and the real bad screw-ups, and have learned from them, like it's good to be able to mentor around some of those people, and some of those guys, Roy, they're just not around anymore for various reasons.
so the last 10 years,
Yeah.
like everyone else, I've had limited experience. I've worked on some projects, but it's been part-time. It's been this and that. But I haven't needed the experience because I had decades of work before that. But someone who's, in their 30s, they've struggled for the last 10 years like everyone else, but have been unable to advance their career and gain some of that experience that'll take them to the next level. So when there's a new project, a major project, they can advance their career. Now projects will have to start over, take the people they can find, but they'll have to provide resources for them so they can work effectively together. And that's what I've done with the KT project, is develop some procedures that'll help projects.
Well, I hope it helps, because in some ways I feel, not cynically, but I do feel like we learn the same lessons over and over again on these projects, and I don't know how to fix it, because sometimes I think it's just human nature,
Sometimes it is.
Yeah.
But
The first thought is, well, you need to document it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really, if you think about it, we don't do anything without documents. We don't even start a truck. We don't even get behind the wheel before we read the document, the walk-around procedure for the truck, right? We need to document these things. And even doing that is sometimes not enough, but at minimum, we have to do that. Because if we don't have that document, then I'm just going to grab the keys and start the truck, and I might run over someone, right? Or who knows what's going to happen if we're not doing it the same way, because we start X amount of trucks every single day, right? And we have to do it the same way. We have to do it the safest way. And the document tells us how to do it, right? Even with that in place, if you don't read the document doesn't help you at all.
Yeah, how to take the human factor is tough to take that out of it, for sure.
Yeah, and also, I'm a truck driver. I know this document. I've read this document 40 times. I've been doing this for 10 years. You think I'm going to read it again?
Every day, yeah.
And, the correct answer is yes, you should read it again, because we just updated it, and there's other things, right? But, human nature is we tend to avoid these repetitious tasks, right? We just say, I've got this document back in my head. I know I need to check the lights. I know I need to check under the tires. And I'm not going to read it because I've read it so many times that I've gone blind to it. So I probably wouldn't even digest it, right? Because I've seen it so many times. So how do you address that?
Yeah, I know the company I work with now, Swears Murphy. They have a lady named Shay Rowland. She's the director of, I want to say, quality assurance or whatever the group's name is. And how we start off all our projects are we review either lessons learned from the previous year for that project or for other projects that are similar. So that's how, before we even start the project, we go through that as a group. And I find it really valuable, go that exercise, but it only matters that you're surrounded by people who take it sincerely and who care about taking these lessons learned and trying to not learn them again. So that's one of their processes at that company, and I think it's fantastic. I find it hard to believe that other companies would do the same, but I hope they do.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to teach the team, because it's not just some general guidance you get from a governing body. This is an actual.
Written by people on the job.
On this project, by people you know. These are their challenges. This is how they resolve them.
This is their recommendation.
These are the successes and failures.
Yeah.
And based on this experience, you should probably do it this way. And if you can think of doing it a better way, document that. And we'll review those at the end of the project during lessons learned, right?
Yeah.
So
That's really gets people's skin in the game, right? As opposed to this governing body saying, thou shalt do this. Right? You have, on this project, in this area, we have this issue, and this is how we resolved it. Do it this way, because that's what experience has taught us.
Yeah.
one of the challenges with projects is they often have a project instruction or other documents to start the project, and they're copied from the previous project, which is okay, but they need to be reviewed. Even if it's the same facility and expansion or a similar project, people change, technologies change, processes change. So those kind of things need to be identified and addressed in a new version. And anytime you're going to a different project, you can't just copy what was done last time. You know, what was done over there may be a different company, a different technology, a different process.
Different scope of work.
It's all energy, so it's very similar. But the documents need to be reviewed at the beginning of the project to ensure that they're appropriate and they're form fit for the project at hand.
Well, what I'm hoping, even by something as simple as like a glossary, like there's a lot of small shops. I would say even Pipes is one of them. They work with a lot of contractors, but a lot of small outfits, they can't afford to have these quality assurance groups to do this kind of oversight on a steady basis of processes, procedures. So I'm hoping maybe this will at somehow even a little bit fill the gap. That's the hope anyway.
So major projects and bigger companies do a better job, and they have people assigned to it and can work with it. Smaller shops don't, and so they need to rely more on what they've done previously. But if they have knowledgeable people, it doesn't take a long time to read a document, mark it up, and say, we need to do this and this different, flag that, reissue it, ready for the next project. So it doesn't need to be an onerous process, but it really should be done.
For sure. But you need someone to own it. And like, again, when you have small shops where they don't have dedicated people or a client that wants to pay for it, because a lot of these, whether you're an engineer or contractor, a lot of this works by the hour. Unless someone's willing to pay for it, sometimes it just doesn't happen. Yeah. Before I let you guys go, I'd like both your thoughts on where you're experiencing, like you said, after Trans Mountain, Coastal, a lot of the NGTL loops buttoned up, there's a lot of folks on the streets right now who are either not working but want to stay in pipeline. Have you guys experienced any of this, and do you have any words of encouragement for them? Not really.
I do have some.
I don't really.
You're not exposed to those groups?
I have a small group of clients, and I long-term clients, and they supply steady work for me. I mean, I'm sympathetic to that, because I've been in that position before.
For sure.
But I can't really. And I know with these new tariffs coming up with the government
today.
Today.
Yeah.
10% on
10%. Yeah.
On oil and gas, I think.
Yeah.
So this is going to just create hardship for everyone, right? I'm kind of protected, knock wood, right? Because I'm on oil and gas, right? My heart goes out. So far, things haven't affected me. Those things haven't affected me, and I've been pretty fortunate to have steady, long-term clients, and I hope that continues. And I hope that those that are struggling find work, right?
Likewise.
It's hard enough trying to work in this industry when the federal government seems to be really intent on sabotaging the economic engine of Canada. It's hard enough, right? When you have politicians trying to shut down your interstate for decades, right? And now we have this, right? And this is going to cause more and more problems for people in the industry. And I'm blessed. I'm fortunate, and my heart goes out to those who are struggling.
Well, hopefully it gets flipped around here with, again, there's a bunch of programs about to come online, multi-year programs for pipeline construction. Again, I don't know the drilling side or the midstreamers, but I know there's some larger stuff coming. So I try to tell people, hang in. But there's a lot of young families out there. It's like, ooh, when is it starting? I'm like, wow, I don't know. It's kind of the summer and fall. I'm not sure.
If I was younger, and had a family, I'd just be in panic mode, right?
Oh, for sure, they are.
I find myself at the end of my career, right? I've got some savings, I've got some resources, and I'm no longer the snotty-nosed high school kid trying to get my foot in the door, and I haven't been for a really long time. So I don't know, I can't imagine the stress that someone who's young, who's up and coming, who's got the education, wants the experience, and now you're facing work shortages, higher costs, probably lower rates. I'm glad I don't have to
Right on.
bear the full brunt of that. But that's only because of my age and my experience, right? If I was 20 years younger, I'd be panicking.
Oh, it's tough. I talked to a lot of people. Are you seeing this, Roy?
Yes, I'm hopeful for a brighter future. We've had 10 years with the projects, but I think many people have come to see that windmills and solar panels are not going to do it. The world needs all forms of energy, in particular fossil fuels, oil and gas. So I think there's a brighter future, and major projects will come back, but it'll bring other challenges. I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, I hope.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, well, I hope. So my sister, before they retired, they own a trucking company. And when they had these little dips in the market for however long, she said they would go not hire the oil and gas guys. And not because they weren't good workers, not because they weren't good people, not because they didn't need the work, not because they didn't have the skill set.
They disappear.
They disappear. And they said it's too tough on them to invest in people and get them moving and then just have them disappear again.
When the jobs come back, then they go. So one thing I've done is I've written actually over 50 pro bono articles that I publish on my website. Most of them, many of them have been edited by Derek. So I talk about networking, resume writing, career success, job search.
LinkedIn QR codes.
Yeah.
Cool.
So actually last summer I was released from the company I was working for, unexpectedly to me, of course. And I walked away going, what's next? So I started thinking, I'll write about it. I wrote an article. Derek edited it. Funny enough, one of the things I do enjoy about writing is when I get an idea I'm going to write, one of my favorite things is to find the feature image. So I go on Google, and very often I'll just look for, sometime I have a personal photograph or something I can use, which spurs the memory or, points to the subject matter. Oftentimes I just go on Google and search, and I'll find something and go, okay, this really, is a picture of what I want to say, or what I'm going to talk about. But lately, Derek's been using GPT to produce AI images.
Yeah.
So I've used a few of those in the articles, and they give a different feel, but it's something new and it's interesting.
It's nice to see how this. I'd like to see how AI affects even what you're doing.
I don't use it. All the writing I do is from my own experience, from my own knowledge. My personal opinion is that it's overrated, and no matter what you do with a machine, you still need a person to ensure the outcome is correct. Otherwise it's garbage in, garbage out. So I don't use AI, and I don't see myself using it. And the more and more technology advances, you think, oh, this is better, this is great. But when projects struggle with the basics, like what's a witness point, what's a hold point, what's an observation point? Well, if everyone has a different idea, if the data sheet says it's this, and the material requisition says it's that, you're going to pay for both, and the supplier's going to say, which one do you want? You're not getting any money back. So you better make sure you have your documents complete and correct.
Well, what we'll do is when we post this podcast, we'll share some of those articles, because I think now I've talked to a lot of people on LinkedIn who aren't working, and they're just grasping at straws to anything that you think can help. So whether it's LinkedIn QR codes or any of the articles for interviewing,
Job search.
like I think that would be really helpful if I can help get those out there.
Yeah, I just wrote the one about QR codes. I went to a networking event, and it was just something that I maybe got an email from Eventbrite. Maybe I saw it on LinkedIn, but it was something at Petroleum Club. Looks good. Click. I think I had to pay about $30, but they give you food and a drink. No, you had to buy drinks. But there was food, lots of people, lots of networking. I met at least 12 people there. So, that's what you need to do. You need to connect. After COVID, it was like so long, there was nothing happening. Nobody was going anywhere. Everything was online. But now we're back meeting,
Oh yeah.
listening to people, share their ideas, give talks, give presentations, network, and everybody, goes there for the same reason. They want to connect. They want to advance their career and look for a new opportunity, or, prepare if the unforeseen comes and someone says, let's go to a meeting, and you go to the meeting and nobody's there. And it's like, can you give me your keys, please? You have to go.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time, and nice to meet you guys both, and we'll look forward to seeing where this adventure of the glossary leads.
The first edition and the second edition at some point in the future, unknown.
Sub 6 years, I hope.
It won't be 6 years, but I hope to do something.
Right on. Well, I appreciate your time, Roy. I appreciate your time, Derek.
Thank you for the
Thanks for
invitation. It's
having
been
us,
great
Dave.
to talk to you. Thank you.
Likewise.
That's awesome.